The show's going to be a little different this season.
We are referring to this as Game of the Game. Well, the game is that there's a hat. In that hat, there are prompts. We do not know what these prompts say.
You and we both don't know what we're going to be talking about next episode. Cookie Pocket, the game of the game.
The game of the game of the game of the game of the game.
The game of the game.
I get it. If I had that level of notoriety and fame, I think I'd be the same way.
Well, I was mentioning to Christian that it's been about 2 weeks since I watched this film, but I think I still remember it pretty well. If we want to jump into discussion, and we haven't really been doing this this season, so I'm going to try to get back into a trend of describing what the film actually is as we open the episode.
No. You just need to know when you're asleep in this world, you're awake in another. Salvador Dali. That's all you need to know.
See, you say that quote, that really doesn't feel like something that feels like something from like a James Cameron movie or something. It doesn't seem like it would fit into this film at all.
Yeah,
But
it's the Avatar.
yeah,
That's literally Avatar. Yeah, that's crazy.
the prompt that I drew last time was written by Mitchell, and the prompt was a Nigerian romance. Now, when I drew that prompt initially, I was quite excited because I think, like a lot of other people, when I think of kind of African films in general, whether they be from Uganda or Nigeria, I generally think of the kind of African films that get big on YouTube. These are films that have come out within like the last 20, maybe 30 years. They're pretty poorly acted, feature lots of bad, like, digital effects that almost seem like a drag and drop from like some kind of effects pack or something like that. For some of the older ones, they're very clearly shot on bad video, or the more recent ones like prosumer camcorders. Those are the kinds of media that I think end up on a lot of like so bad it's good YouTube channels. They're movies that are fun to kind of point and laugh at. So I thought, okay, this will be an interesting opportunity to dive into some African cinema that doesn't get explored very much. And I did a decent amount of research on Nigerian cinema and decided I wanted to pick a movie from the golden age of Nigerian cinema. This is generally considered to be from around the 50s to the 80s or 90s, when Nigeria had an actual film industry, a burgeoning film industry, studios. They were shooting on film, shooting what we would think of as typical kind of studio pictures of the time. And then video came along in the 80s and the market got massively overexposed and the studios kind of collapsed. However, online preservation and records of African cinema in general do not seem to be great. And I could not find any records of something labeled a romance film from that period, or even something that would be streaming from the time that could be comparable to a romance. So, regrettably, I caved. I looked for just sort of Nigerian romances in general, and the two most popular that I found in a lot of lists and a lot of searches were The Wedding Party, which is like a big kind of blowout, big cast family comedy from 2016 set around a wedding, and the film that we are discussing today, Sylvia, which is kind of an erotic thriller. And I thought, we watched a big, goofy, funny movie last time when we talked about Three Idiots. I want to talk about something with at least a slightly harder edge, and picked Sylvia. And I was going to say we all regretted it. I don't think we did. I didn't regret this that much. But I do want to open with, because there was some consternation about this when I said what the film was going to be. Do we feel that this is a romance? It's certainly Nigerian. I'm not going to accept any flack on that front. But is this a romance film?
I actually don't. Christian, go first. You go. Christian is the romance man of the three of us.
That's definitely true.
I'm sorry for stepping on your toes.
No.
I guess I am. I don't know.
That wasn't the question, sir.
Yes. No. I admit I was definitely coming from that place of consternation when I sat down to watch this, so much so that I wonder if it poisoned my experience to some extent. Um, and also, this is also not your question, but I do admit I was a little surprised that this was all spoken in English. I don't know how ignorant that makes me, but I kind of assumed that it wouldn't be, and then it just was. So that was, I guess, a pleasant surprise because you don't have to look down at the subtitles. But I suppose I will not put Zach on trial for this being a romance. I think this it probably sufficiently meets that bar. And I feel like we still haven't really talked about the synopsis of the movie.
Oh,
even
sure,
though Zach
yeah.
kind of set out to do that. But
Botched.
essentially,
It's true.
essentially, the main character Richard has this, I guess, imaginary friend would be the way to describe Sylvia. And there's a couple dream sequences. There's one from when he's a fairly young child, and then we kind of jump to when he's an adult. And the impression I get is that she is his imaginary friend and imaginary love interest, lover, partner, something to that effect. And after he meets Bemi, his would-be wife, he has the dream sequence with Sylvia where he's like, Sylvia, we got to stop seeing each other in this dream world because I'm getting married and this is real and you're not real. and Sylvia's like, how could you say that to me? I'm so real, you jerk. And then Sylvia is real somehow, and she haunts Richard, and some crazy stuff happens, and that's the movie.
This is one of the okay. Before we get too far into the plot, Mitchell, is it a romance?
Yeah, it's not very romantical, but it's a romance. Yeah, I think it was pretty ambiguous. I mean, the end. It leads you on for sure, and you're not really supposed to know. I don't think if she's real. It's like she has some influence in the real world, but not really, which kind of goes a little bit into my critique. But yeah, it's definitely about the romance. I think you were pretty accurate in capturing that synopsis before we watched it, Zach.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that because I heard my sentence would be more severe this time. So I'm glad I'm not going to be taken away in irons. I do think in terms of the plot, I think it opens with that Salvador Dali quotation for a reason. I think the implication is meant to be that Sylvia is some kind of like dream spirit or something, and that when he goes to sleep, he enters this other land. I did just look it up. English is the official language of Nigeria, as it is of more African countries than I think people in the West realize. But I do wonder, as we've said with a lot of these movies we talked about from foreign countries, if there's some cultural difference there in terms of what dreaming is meant to be. You know, here in America, we generally go, oh, well, it's just, your brain processing everything from when you're awake. I don't know if there's some greater sort of cultural or mythological understanding of where you go in your dreams or something like that in Nigerian culture. But I will agree that the stuff that when it comes to Sylvia being kind of a more active presence and doing things to kind of mess with Richard is where the film sort of kind of goes off the wheels a little bit. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed like the first 2/3 though. I know I've just mentioned cultural differences, but I think compared to some of the other foreign films we've watched this season, I was a little surprised at how little culture shock I experienced watching this movie. We've said on multiple occasions while watching Three Idiots and Devil's on the Doorstep and Creation of the Gods, oh, well, maybe that's something that, we just don't understand because it's not part of our culture. And I found myself not feeling that way really at all in while watching Sylvia. I mean, it's a movie about a guy who goes to his everyday job, has a healthy relationship with the woman who eventually becomes his wife, Bemi. They live in a nice apartment. He has a friend who he goes to the club and jokes around with. I think it's all very relatable in a way that I maybe wasn't quite expecting, ignorant as that may sound. And I think even the romance is kind of funny and affecting. Every scene with Richard palling around with his friend, whose name I can't remember, I found them quite funny together, even if their jokes are maybe about 15 years out of date by our Western sensibilities. I had a lot of fun with this. And then in the second half, it tries to be kind of a more overt erotic thriller. And I think that's where it sort of starts to run out of steam and run out of means. I think you can execute a romance or just a character drama fairly well without access to a lot of film gear or style. It's harder to execute something a lot more kind of stylized and thrilling without access to kind of those accents. And that's where the second half kind of falls down, where the first half doesn't really have those problems. Now, the first scene does feature some terrible old man makeup, but for the most part, I wasn't like, oh man, they didn't have the budget to do that until the second half.
Yeah,
No, I'm not stepping on your toes again, Mitchell.
Get off
must
my
go.
toes, Christian. Get off my toes. Why should I get off your toes? Just get off my toes. I am the man of the house. And that gets into what I was about to talk about. There is Nigerians stereotypically are known to be extremely traditionalist, like aggressively traditionalist, especially the male-female nuclear family relationship, where they're very much are men of the house still in Nigerian culture. And I based on what not a lot I know, I do know that in Nigerian cinema there's a heavy emphasis on Christianity and religious values. And I think there was one Letterboxd review that actually mentioned that they appreciated that this wasn't about religion at all. And I thought that was kind of interesting, because I think the most interesting thing to me is the folklore and like the actual, like her being more of a not necessarily a demon, I would go as far as to say, but more like a temptress, a spiritual temptress, which is kind of interesting. I think where it kind of loses me a little bit is that's what she's all about. And his wife, Richard's wife, she is literally there to make baby, and that's about it.
Yeah,
and I'm saying it before Christian said it. Yeah. and to be fair, it's not like, oh, she should have had more lines, or she should have been more, like, I get that's not what the film is about. It's really about Richard and about him grappling with his mental issues and trying to decipher what's happening, and if Sylvia is a real person or not. Like, that's kind of what the film is about. It's not really about like his place in society. It's not about his job. It's not about like raising the kid and everything. It really is just about him and about Sylvia. And so that, to caveat a little bit, but for the most part though, it's a little bit, it's pretty obvious. Like it doesn't really set up his argument. It makes him a lot less easier to sympathize with at all. You kind of just want him to get imprisoned and go to jail. You don't feel bad for the main character. And I think that's a pretty major issue, especially when you're showing him being extremely vulnerable. It almost feels like there's no point. Like we're kind of just along for the ride, which kind of goes into what you were saying, Zach. I mean, the third act pretty much puts the nail on the head, where it's like, okay, we are not supposed to sympathize with him. We're supposed to just watch the train wreck happen and watch him spiral out of control while Sylvia completely controls him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much it. The film never gets into any childhood trauma. I mean, they indicate, his mom dying and him having issues grappling with that, but that's literally it as far as I remember. I don't think there was anything really significant that would have triggered his mental illness he clearly has. And then that also degrades the spiritual part that I was mentioning. Like, if it's a spiritual temptress, how does that fall into the psychology of having dreams? And how does that fall into like having schizophrenia or dissociative or whatever mental illness he clearly has? And it kind of just like, what is the film really going for is kind of what it feels like. But yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
I don't know if I agree that this is trying to be a metaphor for mental illness. I do think that it's trying to be more of like a straightforward thriller, and that Sylvia is a character oppressing him. I mean, you can certainly interpret it as mental illness, but I do think something that sort of muddles the plot towards the end, which you sort of mentioned, Mitchell, is early on in one of the first scenes with Sylvia. Actually, we have this montage where we see Richard when he is a child, and Sylvia is helping him with his homework. And I think he's a bit older, and Sylvia's helping him with something else. And then eventually he's played by the two adult actors, and he's meant to be a young adult, and his mother has died. And he says, Sylvia, why didn't that potion or drug or whatever that you gave me help her? And she goes, I don't know. I guess I just couldn't help her. And in that moment, at least, the acting in this is kind of lifetime. But I do think the performances are affecting. In that scene, you've got real tears from both of the actors, and I think they're doing a good job of being kind of intimate and concerned with each other in that scene. However, at the end of the movie, we learn that Sylvia did not try to help his mother. She deliberately, she claims at least, that that medicine that she gave him to give to her was actually a poison, because Sylvia wants him all to herself. And I do think that kind of muddles the picture a little bit, because if we are meant to, I didn't necessarily by the end feel that we were meant to dislike Richard intrinsically. I think that Sylvia's persecution kind of turns Richard into a person that we don't like, which we see in that scene where he kind of becomes this conservative man of the house figure railing at his wife. But I don't think intrinsically he's meant to have brought this all on himself. However, if that was something the film was trying to imply, I think it really shoots itself in the foot by making it so that Sylvia deliberately killed his mother, because in that case, it becomes less his, not less his fault, but if Sylvia did try to help his mother, then it becomes a case of like this woman, and she's imaginary, but in the dynamic of the film, she's essentially like a real woman that he's concerned with and has a relationship, and she's his friend who has done nothing but help him. He spurns her, he casts her aside for this other woman, and that makes her angry because of how callous he's been. But if the information that's revealed to us later, that she killed his mother, is in fact the truth, that muddles that whole frame, because I don't necessarily think Richard is a bad guy in that case for casting out a person who deliberately killed his mother, even if he didn't know it at the time. It gets messy towards the end, I think, is what I'm just trying to get at, and not in a way that is necessarily easy to pick apart and take sides on. Because it gets so muddled at the end, it's difficult to say like, well, I think you're right, I think you're wrong about any kind of interpretation of what Sylvia is or what she means or who is the bad guy in this situation.
Yeah, I think I felt bad for Richard. I mean, he was going through it by the end of this movie. I agree that it gets pretty muddled by the end, and I couldn't help but think of Creation of the Gods a little bit, and the function of the demon fox lady in that film, and how it changes, where she sort of becomes admiring of that false king and wanting to help him because he like woke her up, whatever. But
Awaken.
There we go. Yeah.
Thank you. Basic verb tenses here. In Sylvia, her motivation doesn't really come from as logical a place, I feel like, and the whole thing with Richard's mother, that just feels like an arbitrary way in which to tack on like an addition, like twist the knife a little bit more for whatever reason. Right. I think for the whole movie, we're really only concerned with Bemi and her relationship with Richard and how Sylvia conflicts with that. And while the performances are definitely sort of in the Lifetime sensibility, I think I would go so far as to say the performances were my favorite thing about this, or even the best thing about this. I think the actress that plays Sylvia is very effectively menacing and does the sort of like emotional manipulation and turn on the dime thing with facial expressions and physicality really well. I think these actors would succeed in genre filmmaking pretty easily. in the West or anywhere. And I think in partial defense of the way Richard and Bemmy's conflict is scripted, if the film doesn't totally represent Bemmy as more than just this like noble housewife, she does at least have that throwaway line where she's like, "You don't get to boss me around. It's 2018." She doesn't say that exactly. I'm paraphrasing, but she has this like comeback where it's like it's not the 19th century anymore. So I'll give them half a point for that. But it gets muddled by the end, and I do think there are like technical things that bugged me the most, like the very obviously glued on beard in the asylum or wherever Richard's being kept, and the zoom the first time Richard sees Bemmy at the restaurant or whatever, and the zoom on it, like you see Bemmy and then the camera goes back to Richard and it's like zoom, and then the corny music plays, and then the guy behind Richard's like, rice, sir, do you want shrimp rice?
And then she's like sticking her bare foot in his crotch, and it's just
that happens later.
Uncomfortable.
So this isn't a serious criticism, but that scene was maybe the first, the scene where he meets Bemmy. He goes to the restaurant. It was maybe the first, like, what is happening moment in the film. He goes to a buffet and then he orders as if he's at like a Chipotle or something, even though the spoons and like the dishes are on his side. And maybe that's just like this is the location
cultural
we had.
difference, Zach. You don't understand.
Maybe, but I'm less likely to chalk it up to that on this one. I think
maybe they glue beards on there.
I think it's more likely that they had that location and they thought, well, this is the location we have to work with. And it's very, very easy when you're making a low budget film to get in your head about things and think, oh, the audience is going to care about that. And this is one of those notorious, it gets attributed to Harrison Ford, but so many people have said this on so many different sets, where, in the first Star Wars film, I think Mark Hamill was concerned about something to do with his hair in a shot. And Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill tells the story all the time, said, "Kid, if people are looking at your hair, we've done something wrong," or whatever. And it's so easy to say that on set. But at a certain point, there are things that you do need to worry about. And you do need to think, hey, maybe it's all right to point out that the audience will think it's weird if he goes to a buffet and orders food. Maybe we should spin the things around. Like it's an easy thing to like toss off. So many things are easy to just kind of go, the audience isn't going to care. The audience isn't looking at that. But sometimes the audience is looking at that.
And I think we would be so remiss not to mention the star of the film, the hibiscus plant. The hibiscus flower is the star of the film. We see the hibiscus more than any character in the film. There's a hibiscus in every scene. Every scene. It's ridiculous. It makes no sense. Every film has a motif. But if you see a hibiscus more than you see a lightsaber, we have some issues. We have some freaking issues.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, wow, it's the towel is now the hibiscus. And the girl is now Sylvia. And now the girl is gone. And now there's a hibiscus there. I'm like, what is happening?
Well,
I feel like half the film, Richard is just looking confused and stressed out. And I guess that's a character trait. Yeah. I guess that's an emotion to have. But
there is definitely too much of that. I think in my Letterboxd review, I compared this to Fatal Attraction, which maybe it wasn't a direct comp, but it's a similar story. In Fatal Attraction, Michael Douglas is, he's a married family man with a great wife, and he has a young daughter, and he has everything he could want in the world, and he chooses to have like a one-night stand fling where he cheats on his wife. And then this woman that he cheats on her with becomes obsessed with him and starts stalking him and trying to ruin his life. And this kind of does that. I mean, Sylvia is more entrenched in Richard's life than the character is in Fatal Attraction. But the overall idea of, this outside person trying to kind of creep their way into your relationship because they feel that you are theirs is kind of similar. What Fatal Attraction does better than this is kind of the escalation of that threat and that stalking over time. Sylvia never really does anything other than just sort of like show up and glower at Richard and ruin his presentation or throw him off his work until maybe the last 10 minutes when suddenly everything happens at once. And that means that it's at a certain point, you sort of feel like, okay, well, where are we going with this? What is Sylvia actually going to do? Compared to in Fatal Attraction, where the approach on Michael Douglas's life happens gradually. There's weird notes, and the family's pet is killed, and there's a slow kind of escalation where it's just kind of the history of humanity before the invention of the computer. It's just a flat line in this film, and then zing during the last like 10 minutes of the bar graph.
Hibiscus plant, and then you're stabbing your wife, your pregnant wife.
I thought when I forget what that character's name is, when Richard's friend shows up to a dinner and he has a girl who looks remarkably like Sylvia on his arm, I thought, oh, this is really interesting. Maybe this is the escalation I've been looking for. Sylvia is impersonating this woman, and she's going to kill Richard's friend and frame him for it. And then that didn't happen. But I thought for a moment this could be really interesting.
Yeah,
I knew as soon as his friend arrived I was like, oh, it's going to be Sylvia for sure.
Oh,
that was clear as day to me.
Yeah.
And I think there were still a couple little things they could have done to sort of clarify Sylvia or Cynthia, whichever way, her intentions or her desires. Like in the final sequence where everything just goes crazy and Richard thinks this is like major spoilers if you want to watch this. Richard thinks he's attacking Sylvia with a knife,
Mhm.
but she like teleports out the way or something, and instead he stabs and kills Bemi. And then Obaro comes in, and then Sylvia kills Obaro
Mhm.
to frame Richard. And she's like, or you could run away with me. And if her incentive for all this is to get Richard to like come away with her and be with her forever, I feel like there was a much better way to go about doing it. Like, she could have framed Obaro for the death of Bemi to sort of entice Richard. Like, she could have timed it out better where she kills Bemi, but then she's like, but I'll help you frame Obaro for this if you come away with me, or something like that. It just felt like there were ways in which to sort of modify or temper that last 10 minutes. I didn't necessarily have a huge problem with the way the blood and stuff was realized. I don't know if you did, Zach, as our resident horror guy. But it was just too much too soon.
Yeah, I thought it was the gore is fine. It's not really it's not shot that well. But this movie is shot competently. But as I've said, everything in those last 2 minutes lacks the style that I think it's kind of looking for. Where it really becomes apparent, oh, we do not have what we're looking for to execute these scenes, is Sylvia makes Richard mess up his presentation at work, and then he goes into the bathroom and he calls Bemi and he goes, "You need to stay in the house and be safe." Or no, he says, "Go to your mother's or something. Leave town. My freaky dream girlfriend is gonna try to kill you," or something to that effect. And then Sylvia appears behind him and starts menacing him. And clearly in the storyboards or in the concepts for this scene, they thought, and we'll have a red light and it'll be all sinister. And in reality, there's daylight streaming through a back window, and there might be a red LED kind of pointed at the wall. And feels like it's meant to be like a stylistic shot out of like Creepshow or something, just kind of ends up feeling blatantly amateurish and like they didn't have what they needed to execute their vision. And that made me a little sad, because until that point, maybe the film wasn't great, but I was at least enjoying it for what it was.
I think that goes back to what I was saying about the mental illness thing, though. I think the allegory becomes a lot more apparent to me when everything she's doing is so beyond unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
And also, although I was initially more interpreting it as like she's a spirit first, like that's kind of like the big thing, is that she's some type of temptress or some folklore derivative. But the thing with folklore is that normally there's some type of purpose or like messaging associated with it,
Mm-hmm.
where there's kind of like, or they represent some type of emotion, and that emotion normally doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's not like you're just having a day and you're just at work and then this temptress just comes and just ruins your life and just makes everything a living hell for you, and there was never really any reason for it to happen. Like there really is no motivating factor. And I mean, even with all those horror films and all the cheap Italian crap that we watch, at least
catching strays out here.
there is a synopsis. There is like an actual backstory.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is a motivation. There is a very clear intent behind these happenings, and sometimes it's really stupid. Sometimes it's like, well, back in this day, they owned this house and this family and all that crap we hear, slasher films in the 80s and everything. It's always the same story. Somebody murdered somebody in this house or whatever. Or you're on Indian burial grounds or all that crap, quote unquote, not to offend anybody. But the thing with this is just like, she's there. She's an imaginary friend.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's like having this relationship with him, and the way, and it's like she's kind of a friend or like a lusting thing or a love thing. Does she want to have kids with him? Like she's kind of in the real world but kind of not. She can teleport in places. She can represent people different ways. Like she's his best friend's girlfriend,
Mm-hmm.
but like she's also like friends with his wife, and we don't really know why. And Richard doesn't really explain why he doesn't want them together. He doesn't explain anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of like a traditional mental problem where it's like you don't feel comfortable articulating what your issues are, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't feel comfortable like expressing what you're seeing because you don't think anybody's going to believe you or take you seriously. And I that's the only thing I can really hang on. There's really nothing else. And I think the cheapness factor and the hallmarky Lifetime aspects of it really exacerbate that point, and it makes you hone in on the writing. It makes you hone in on the it makes you hone in not on the writing, but it makes you hone in on the technicalities and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's because the stupid conversations they have are just they don't amount to anything. But I will say, like, when they're in the gym, like, oh shoot, like this almost feels ad-libbed right now. Like they're kind of just saying whatever's coming to mind, or like the straight gay conversation. Like even though that was a ridiculous conversation, it was like, this sounds like two dudes just talking about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very believable conversation. And I was like, oh, okay, like give me more of that. Like these are probably just bros being bros type conversation. But then like Sylvia comes and is like gesticulating and like, I guess she's supposed to be hot and that's it. That's like her whole thing, So it's more like she's like a succubus, I guess. But it's just a weird.
Mm-hmm.
Really, you don't know what to get out of this film. You really don't know what to get out of it.
I don't think any of it is that complicated, really. I think it's I don't really even know if it's meant to work as kind of a bit of folklore. I will agree with you again that I think Sylvia could be some kind of a metaphor, perhaps, for mental illness. But I think within the narrative itself, I don't really think there's any particularly good explanation other than her being a spirit. Because especially that scene at the end where the nurse goes, I believe you, there was a woman downstairs who gave me this flower and said she wanted to hang out. And then Richard says, I'd rather be dead in a ditch or something like that. And I think that is meant to be the button where we go, so Sylvia was real. He wasn't mentally disturbed. I mean, I think it could still be metaphorical, perhaps, and that could still be some of the imagery that they're relying upon. But really, I don't know if this is meant to be anything more than a a kind of romantic thriller with the tagline "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned."
Mhm. There's that one sequence in the dream world where he goes back to Sylvia after spurning her, and she gives him like a few little tips to very basic tips to
Yeah.
fix his presentation that made me chuckle, like change the protocol to plan or something goofy like that to fix all the problems. And there's oh gosh, I completely lost my train of thought. Um,
While you get it
oh
back,
my god.
I'll say, at first I thought that scene was funny. But I did think, okay, if Sylvia is meant to be this miraculous being who has knowledge of exactly how to fix the plan, then, you know, maybe the point is that this client is like really fickle, as clients can be, as somebody who's worked freelance. And, you know, these tiny little changes are all these tiny specific little changes that she knows about because she's in the head of the client, are all that's necessary to make it work. And I thought, okay, I can headcanon my way into believing that.
Mhm. I got it back.
Okay.
I think if there was just a little more distinction in literally anything, be it the characters themselves, or I think his friendship with Abaro is basically fine as it is, but his work and his occupation, like there are a lot of scenes of him just like in the office or in the presentation room where he's like, I got to figure out this business thing for my business and it's just not working and I need to get the stuff right, but like we know nothing substantive about what he's actually doing. He gives this like generic presentation that only bombs because like Sylvia is like brushing up against him, but the people in the room can't see her, so he starts. It seems like he's acting crazy and hallucinating to them, but it just underscores this sort of soap opera angle of all of it, and maybe that's just something you have to accept coming into it. But it's just so constant in reminding you like every facet other than their performances, which I think are of real quality. I think everything else around them just doesn't match that.
I appreciate the scale and the scope that they're going for. It was very easy to keep track of. It was a fairly simple plot and not a whole lot of locations. And I think the small scale keeps it a little bit more grounded. I mean, there's not like any big set pieces or like memorable shots unless you like hibiscus or something. There's not any like super memorable shots, and the coloring is super flat and disgusting most of the time.
Out.
Yeah, it's super washed out. But other than that, like, you know, there is a sense of believability that's being gone after, and there is something to say like, yeah, business, hot business, look at chart. It's relatable because it's broad, you know, so I can kind of get that angle. But that just goes back to what Zach was saying. Like, there's really only a handful of things they're really going after, if even that. It really is just like, I am getting married. I am getting married. That's why. But I'm so hot and sexy, and I help you with everything. I'm getting married. No, you are my wife, and you are making baby, and you are temptress, and I hate you. And that's that. But he's like, it's believable. Like, he's very emotive. You know, he's not like this otherworldly person or something. Like, he's a dude that just goes to work. So it's not like they go for anything crazier than that. But
the closest we get to like a lore explanation for Sylvia is there's that one moment where she talks about what the red hibiscus symbolizes in the, I don't remember if it's the Nigerian culture broadly or a specific religion, but she says it symbolizes like love, passion, war, and motherhood, or like three of those four things or something.
oh,
But
yeah,
there's
yeah,
like
yeah.
there's like some skeevy element to it. But then she never like that teases at the idea that Sylvia is this like spirit or has this sort of godlike or magical existence. But other than that, it's never delved into.
I'm okay that we don't get a full explanation. I will say, I think, although it might be frustrating in some scenes to not have a firm grasp of what Sylvia is, I'm always more fond of like a general supernatural and they never learned what happened than I am of ghost stories or supernatural stories that have some kind of a clunky scene where somebody on Zoom in a Dark Side of the Moon t-shirt goes, well, what you got here is a basic Sylvia. You're going to need to lay down some garlic, as according to this book. Like, those exposition scenes are always so clunky, and I think rarely necessary. So I'm fine that we don't necessarily have a firm idea of where she comes from or what she is. Although I suppose in that montage we could have gotten, it might have even been more satisfying in that opening montage to have a scene where they like first meet, which I don't think happens. That could have maybe fixed a lot of those issues, and also provided us with more of a sense of betrayal when Richard kind of tries to turn his back on Sylvia. If we had a scene where they were both like 5 and Richard is crying over something and Sylvia says, hello, do you want to be friends, or something like that. That'd be kind of a cliched scene for this sort of movie, but this movie isn't exactly working hard to not traffic in cliches.
There's a middle ground between like explaining it or even just like heavily alluding to it, which they also don't need to do.
Mm-hmm.
They can leave it up to interpretation, but at least give us like an idea of what it could be. I don't know. Like instead of just having her just be there. The reason why is because the writing is just not good enough. The conversations are not maybe not dense enough. They don't need to be complex or anything. They just need to go a step beyond what they do. They need to be a little bit more tied to the overarching conflict, I guess. I mean, I got to get something more out of Richard than him just explaining what I was just talking about. Like if Richard, like, at least Richard should have some idea of what she is. And it almost seems like he's grappling with something, but he never actually like articulates it even to the audience, or even like maybe it's just like an acting experience thing where it's like he's less of that type of actor. I'm not really sure. I really think it's a direction writing thing with him, because if he's just constantly just like you know, the whole time, then it's like I can't relate to that, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A scene where he goes to the library or catches like a documentary or something on TV and something reminds him of his relationship with Sylvia. Wait a minute. Could that be? And then the doorbell rings and Obaro comes in and then the scene moves on, or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, anything that makes him more relatable and makes him more easier to sympathize with in a situation, rather than having him be like a disconnected being in this like other world, you know, and just like the tagline kind of sends it home. It's like he's like dreaming all the time or something, and it's just an airiness to the point of floating away, effectively.
Yeah.
Well, I sense we're kind of wrapping up on this film. Before we do, I wanted to mention the look of the movie, which I'd kind of forgotten about until you guys brought it up. And I have a bit of a theory. It seems too simple to be true. And perhaps they color graded this movie deliberately this way because, you know, the whole washed out look, especially a couple of years ago, was pretty big in a lot of dramas and movies like this in Western cinema. However, it is also possible there is a setting on a lot of professional video and digital cameras that allows you to shoot your footage in what is referred to as log. This is kind of Zach's camera talk for the listeners. And this is essentially a color profile that straight out of the camera appears very kind of washed out and gray. And it doesn't look good straight out of the camera. It's not a usable image straight out of the camera. However, it's designed so that in color correction and color grading, you have as much room as possible to alter those colors. But, you know, you need to apply a LUT, which is a lookup table, a basic like effects look to it. You need to adjust the colors. You need to put some work in. You can't just take that image straight out of the camera. I am suggesting that there is a non-zero chance that they shot with a quite nice camera on this film in log and just took the footage straight out of the camera and didn't do much color work on it, and that's why the movie looks so washed out. I'm not saying that's likely, but I'm saying it's possible. What are we weekend reviewing?
I'll go first.
Oh.
I never go first. Anybody remember the Nostromo? Does anybody remember?
Oh my God! Are you talking
anybody
about
remember
the
Ellen
FX
Ripley?
show?
You remember Sigourney Weaver? You remember that one kitchen scene with the chest burster and everything? You might not remember that. You might not remember that, like, top 10 most iconic sci-fi scene of all time. But let me tell you, when you open your Alien show, we're talking about Alien Earth. When you open your Alien show on Hulu, Disney Hulu, and that is like the first scene, you know you're in for a nostalgia trip. You know that they're going to hit every Alien movie trope. You know they're going to hit every... They'll hit ones from Alien 3. In fact,
My favorite.
a part of Alien 3, the plot is very similar to a very key plot point in the show.
Hey.
And let me tell you something else. You ever seen Blade Runner? There's Blade Runner in this. There's Blade Runner. There's synths. Don't worry. Androids, old news, man. There's synths. There's AI. There's corporations owning the world. It all just makes sense. It all just works. Todd Howard from Bethesda said it all just works, right? And look. All right. They use practical effects for the xenomorph. Okay, you can't. There you go. That Zach has approved. That's at least
Zach
a
just
star.
gave a thumbs up if we were videoing.
That's at least a star. Right?
On the chalkboard that says Alien Earth Mitchell. There's one tick on the Alien Earth side now.
Let's go. The acting is pretty good, and TV shows, when they try to be a film and they do these wide shots of buildings crumbling, it doesn't work. It does not work with the budget. It looks like a messy, blurry mess every time. Stop doing that. Keep it small scale instead of showing the gigantic ship crashing on all these skyscrapers. Anyway, yeah, it's I've watched the first 2 episodes. I think the third one, maybe the fourth one, has come out as of today, but it's I want to watch more of it. I don't want to spoil it too much. There are new creatures in it that are pretty interesting. They're pretty gross. I don't like the whole synth plotline or the cyborg plotline. Well, I like the cyborg guy. He's awesome. But the synth people are not very cool. One of them literally looks like Rutger Hauer, okay? Like, it's kind of stupid.
That's annoying.
Is it a
and
digital
it's Timothy
thing,
Oliphant.
or is just
No,
the
it's
actor
the way
resembles
he's dressed.
Him? Oh, okay.
Well, Timothy Oliphant doesn't look a whole lot like him, but he has the
could see
white
it,
hair and
Uh-huh.
the outfit. He acts a little bit like him. Anyway, they just insert sci-fi tropes that don't really need to exist. There's the alien parentheses S go to town on people, and it's very gross, and nobody really reacts that much. It's shoving a lot into a TV show when it really, I believe Alien should just be a film experience. It really, capturing the psychology of horror and capturing the thrills and the drama really can only be done in a film format. I as of right now is what I believe. And the show is, I appreciate them getting into the corporation thing finally, going beyond the usual Weyland-Yutani thing where they go to other corporations and there's a little bit of a conflict. There's a kid, he's like our age, trillionaire guy that owns this whole city that the ship crashes into. So there's a little bit of conflict with him. He has his like bare feet everywhere and he wears a robe and he's like, as you would imagine, I don't even need to explain to you what personality he has, but there's some aspects of it that are really cool. I'm just super mixed on the execution. There's these weird like nostalgic scenes and Ice Age, and I don't know if anybody's seen the memes.
What is that about?
But it's such like a childhood nostalgia thing that she has,
Oh.
and I don't want to spoil it too much. It's basically revealed in the beginning, but she is a child put into the body of the synth essentially.
Mhm.
So she has
She's
like a
nostalgic
childlike
about
personality.
Ice Age the movie.
Yes, yes.
What?
You
It makes
you
a little
haven't
bit
been on
more-
Twitter, Christian. Yeah, this has been a
It
meme
makes-
for like a week and a half.
That's so
It
stupid.
makes Sid, there's a picture of her looking at like Sid talking and whatever. But anyway, it makes sense in context, but it just what is the show going for, right? I don't want to drone on for too long about it, but it's trying a lot at once. First episode tries way too much at once, and there's some kills that remind me of Aliens, and there's a little bit of horror that reminds me of the original, but like there's no reference at all to Covenant or Prometheus. I'm pretty sure that the show's creators explicitly retconned that for this show. I'm not sure if they've outright
Wow.
said that. I'm pretty sure they said they retconned it for the show.
What about Romulus?
And Romulus, I believe too. I'm not 100% sure on that, but there's nothing in the show so far that's at all alluded to anything beyond the first 3 films, which is interesting. But anyway, well, I should say the first 2 films. I forget exactly where we are in the timeline in this. This might even be just before the first one. Now that I remember, doesn't matter. Anyway, I encourage anybody interested in that universe to at least try it and see if you're interested in it. I'm interested to see where it goes. There's a lot of new things that were very bold decisions. Like I said, having like the synths and the corporations being kind of a main focus, but I'm worried about it. There's a lot of nostalgia bait. It could go very wrong from here.
It's interesting you mentioned there's some crossover with Alien 3, because Alien 3 was notoriously like a very messy production. They had a trailer and they were building sets before they got a finished script. And originally one of the concepts for Alien 3 was going to be the alien's going to be on Earth now, which they're finally doing in this show. And the initial teaser trailer, which they made before they even have finished script, the narrator says something like, but this time they're on Earth or something like that. So it's interesting to hear they're finally doing that like 35 years later.
Yeah, and by so far, at least by Earth, it just means on and around the ship.
Oh, okay.
Like maybe the show's gonna go crazy, probably, but like, it's just really like the cloning thing. There's like subtle allusions to it, but there's no like direct connection yet, as far as I can tell.
I am also somebody who prefers alien horror over alien action, but I will say there was a discarded script for Alien 3 when it was still going to be on Earth that featured a sequence with Bishop on top of the Berlin Wall gunning down xenomorphs with dual machine guns.
Whoa.
Yo.
That would have been pretty cool.
That's pretty sick.
Yeah.
Speaking of, maybe not speaking of machine guns, because I feel like I'm going to talk about Weapons, the movie titled Weapons.
Do you want to
which
tag
is
team
not-
this one, Christian?
I would totally be up for that.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
I wasn't sure if you were going to, but I wanted to say I feel like I'm the only person on the planet that didn't see like a ton of trailers and promo for this movie. I don't think I ever saw any trailer for this. If I did, I don't remember seeing it. And I've seen like a ton of reviews of people saying they feel like it doesn't deliver on the promise of the premise of, and the basic premise, if you haven't heard, is there's this, I think, first grade classroom of kids, and one morning at 2:17 a.m. all of the kids run off to somewhere, nobody knows where. They just get up and run out of their houses and leave, except for the teacher of the class and one of the kids. And it's this sort of mystery horror. And I was just so compelled by this. I haven't been this impressed by a horror movie since probably the first time I saw The Thing. I know that's like crazy to say.
Oh.
But this was a 5-star movie for me, and it wasn't like a close call. I totally loved this. It surprised me at every turn. I thought most of the performances were phenomenal, especially Julia Garner as the teacher. I'm really a sucker for when movies take a lot of time to develop their characters and their story. And I think this totally does that in ways that are unpredictable and compelling. I think the way that the audience's allegiance or level of trust with Julia Garner's character shifts and changes in the first act is kind of similar to what Anatomy of a Fall does with the wife who may or may not have killed her husband, which is obviously totally different genre, but I think it just says a lot about Zach Cregger's writing chops that he's able to work that type of genre and dense character into a horror movie that has jump scares and is totally a horror movie by the end of the movie. I was disappointed when it then pivoted away from that character to go to Josh Brolin's character or plenty others, but then they were all similarly compelling. I think Alden Ehrenreich's plays a police officer, and he's just crazy good. It's a wild ride. I was so scared, and so I can't remember the last time I'd sat in a theater and been engaged with a movie on that level, in part because I was anticipating the jump scares and just scared out of my mind. But that coupled with this type of clever writing, and so original too. Zach Cregger didn't co-write this with anyone. It was just him that wrote the story and screenplay. I think that's amazing. I can't think of another example of a movie like that. I don't know if Jordan Peele had any co-writers for Get Out. I feel like that would be like the obvious reference point for the genre. But I was blown away by this. I think maybe it doesn't deliver on the promise of being like a broad commentary about school shootings or crimes against children or big societal hot button issues. It sort of plays at those things in one or two ways. Obviously the title does, but I think maybe similarly to Eddington in a weird way, it sort of is a melting pot of all these ideas and triggers and conflicts in our society now that are just dealt out to characters and situations in ways that are just maximally dramatically compelling. I'm straining really hard not to reveal stuff that happens here because I think going in blind is the best way to do it. I think maybe if I saw the trailer like so many other people did, I might have been disappointed because it might not be what it was marketed to be. But going in blind, except for seeing the poster and knowing the tagline, I was amazed. I think if you can stomach like a few jump scares, I would really encourage you to see it. 5 stars.
And I also really enjoyed it. I did not enjoy it as much as Christian did. I was a 4-star rater, but I did enjoy it. Now, I'm usually the exact opposite of Christian in terms of how I address a movie going in. I am totally fine with watching all the trailers and seeing the pre-movie interviews and taking a look at all the different posters and looking into how the script was written and stuff like that. For this movie, though, I did try to avoid pretty much everything other than that first trailer. I saw the first trailer, which is kind of a trailer for the title, which I think is also the best trailer that they put out, and that I've gone back and watched them, which is where the different letters are appearing throughout, and we're kind of just getting different scraps of these very disturbing images that occur during the film. But I went in more or less as blind as I could, and I did really enjoy it. I thought it was effectively frightening. It's got some great tension. There are good jump scares in it, but they're jump scares that I respect more than a lot of jump scares that occur in lots of other horror movies, because the scare comes from the genuine use of stretched tension to the breaking point until something eventually occurs, as compared to a lot of other jump scares in more modern films, which are just a loud sound suddenly happens and it startles you. Here I do think they like that. Here I do think they qualify as actual scares and are frightening, and there's some great imagery. There has been some criticism, as Christian has said, of that this doesn't live up to its commentary. But I think in the movie's defense, the concepts that a lot of people were attaching to it early on, I don't think have ever been concepts that Zach Cregger has said, yep, that's what the movie's about. A lot of people speculated that this would be sort of metaphorically about school shootings. And I think you could attach that meaning to it. You could attach that lens to it, and it would be effective in that manner, especially in the way it concludes, where, you know, everything does not end up sunshine and roses at the end of the day. And there's also a moment of what Zach Kreger has called an impossible thing floating above a house that maybe ties into that meaning. But for the most part, I don't think he's ever said that it was meant to be about that. I think the most he said is that he wrote the script as a way of processing the death of Trevor Moore, who died a couple of years ago, and who was also a member of Whitest Kids You Know with Zach Kreger. Now, there were some things in the film that I thought were kind of just sort of a sheen of clever applied over the top, which I think is all right. I think it's fine to have sort of lofty ideals that a movie doesn't necessarily dive into, but they're there to lend it some flavor, such as the impossible thing, although I give that a little more credence now that apparently Zach Kreger has said that image was just a dream he had and he wanted to put it in the script. I'm okay with that as somebody who's down with the whole David Lynch assessment of ideas as paintings and stuff like that. I'm fine with that. There's also some reference to a particular biblical verse, which if you actually look it up to read it, isn't even like a full sentence. So I get what it's going for, but again, it doesn't all mesh there. I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. I was indeed frightened in the cinema, and I had fun seeing it with friends. And at night when I got home and my laundry room was open and it was dark in there, I was suitably spooked. But I didn't think it was a perfect film. Very entertaining, and I totally recommend seeing it. I think that unless you're somebody who just rolls their eyes at horror movies in general, I'm hard pressed to think of anybody who wouldn't get anything out of this. And yeah, it runs the gamut of so many different kinds of horror, from, really brooding, sinister. I mean, speaking of David Lynch, there's some real emphasis on kind of like the evil of suburbia in this, to kind of Sam Raimi over the top gore Three Stooges type stuff in a very particular moment that I haven't seen spoiled that often on the internet at this point. So yeah, definitely go and see it. By the time this episode comes out, or well, definitely watch it. By the time this episode comes out, it will most likely not be in your local cinema any longer. But rent it, watch it with some friends, laugh at each other when you jump out of your seats. It's fun.
Yeah.
I won't say he's a friend at work, but he's a civilian that works on our team, and he's super machismo. We'll just say that. I won't get him in trouble. He's super machismo, and he's like, "Hey, you see that new Alien Earth episode? Oh, dude, oh, it's so good." Oh, and then one day he's like, "Dude, you see Weapons? Like, dude, that movie was scary. Like, that movie was great. Like, you gotta go see Weapons." I was like, I kind of believe him. I don't believe him on any other thing that he says, but I believe him on entertainment after work. So I might go see it.
I will say most of it has kind of like dulled down in my brain at this point, where after you see a frightening film, all those images are in your head when you do anything, and then eventually they die down. Yeah. There is one particular image in it that has really stayed up there, and anytime I'm taking out the trash or walking to get the mail and it's dark outside, it's still up there. It's got a few like that.
It's like driving home after watching all 3 Omens in a row. Actually, that was more just tiring than anything else, but yeah. I was still stressed out.
I think the craziness of the ending of the third one sort of saved me from the most traumatic recollections.
That is true. If we ended on 2, it would have been scary.
We didn't talk about that on the show. I don't think we did we? We've made mention of it so many times, but I can't believe we didn't do a whole episode on that.
Everything we would want to say about it, we probably said like in between, like and during, because that we were so fatigued after that. Oh man, don't do it, guys.
No, yeah.
Don't do that.
And I finally watched the 4th one, like last year with some,
Whoa.
no, like 2 years ago on Halloween with some friends, and it really wasn't worth it either. Just watch the first one. But this episode isn't about the Omen. Christian has to draw a prompt.
Hey.
Yes, and I have to find a lot of things. There's my prompt.
Just so everybody knows, I think I mentioned this last time. That Nigerian thing, I knew when we first mentioned that we were going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
That was literally the first thing that came to my mind. And I don't know why. I have no idea why. I was going to do
this
like...
prompt?
I think I was... I was gonna do this prompt. I was gonna do like LGBT or something, but I think I was like it was being too over specific, so I just kept it like
Sure.
And now knowing like how difficult it is to find African films in general that are historic, let alone
Yeah.
recent, let alone historic, it's like, damn.
I'm sure if I had just gone, like, I am sure that somewhere there is a Nigerian film from the golden age of Nigerian cinema that is accessible to stream online that is a romance. There simply must be. But I couldn't find any kind of like a database or a list or a record. I was on like the official film society, Nigerian Film Society website, and it was suggesting like a notable film from this period of Nigerian cinema history is this war epic, and I was like, well, that's not gonna work. So,
Ain't no romance unless
Okay.
it's Pearl Harbor.
Here we go.
oh, okay, all right.
I'm so scared.
Uh-oh.
Okay, here we go. Decode. A Hong Kong action film.
Oh, okay.
No way. We're going back.
I did write this
You know-
prompt. I'm excited to see what happens here.
I was going to use a mulligan. I really was. And I was going to not, but I won't. I won't because I want to do this prompt.
Okay.
But we've done a lot of prompts, man, and it's starting to feel like the mulligans are just like tapestries or something.
We're having such a good time. All three of us are learning so much from this.
Yeah, I will say, I think I've mentioned it before. I didn't expect all three of us to be so willing to just go with the flow. I think the closest we have come to an actual mulligan was episode 2 when Christian had to pick an Italian horror film. And the next day he did in fact say I should have mulliganed.
I think I would have, were that not like the first prompt I pulled.
Yeah.
I think if I pulled that prompt now, I probably would have mulliganed it. But you got lucky.
All right. So you have until, let's say, 7 p.m. tomorrow to present us with a Hong Kong action film that we'll be talking about for next time.
Eastern Standard Time.
Yes.
Don't mess around here.
The game of 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 the game.